They said love doesn't happen overnight. But what if it did, on a blind date you never planned to attend? What if the man you married was a stranger by name, yet somehow already knew your heart? Liana thought she was living an ordinary life. Quiet mornings, simple love, small miracles. Until one day, the world revealed who her husband really was, and she realized the fairy tale she'd been living wasn't fiction at all. Liana never believed in blind dates. To her, they were just awkward dinners with desperate strangers and forced smiles. So when her aunt begged her to attend one, she agreed only to get it over with. She didn't even dress to impress, just a simple white blouse, jeans, and her Lucky Charm bracelet. But the moment she walked into that restaurant and met his eyes across the room, something shifted. He stood up, tall, calm, with a quiet confidence that filled the air. "I'm Adrian," he said, his voice smooth, steady, almost hypnotic. Liana blinked. "Just Adrian?" He smiled. "Just Adrian." They talked for hours, laughing like they'd known each other in another life. And somehow, by dessert, the conversation took a turn neither of them expected. "What if," he said playfully, "we just skip the dating part and get married?" She almost choked on her drink. "You're joking, right?" He wasn't. And for reasons she couldn't explain, maybe it was his calmness, or the way he looked at her like she was already his, she said yes. That night, Liana went to bed as a stranger. The next morning, she woke up as someone's wife. Liana had imagined married life would be simple, maybe a little awkward at first, but peaceful. What she didn't expect was a husband who acted like a human magnet. Adrian called every hour. He texted to ask if she'd eaten. He'd show up at her office just to walk her home. He was clingy, like gum stuck to the bottom of her shoe, but annoyingly enough, he was sweet about it. When her car broke down, a brand new one appeared in the driveway the next morning. When she complained about her noisy neighbor, the neighbor moved out within a week. Every time she asked, Adrian just shrugged and said, "Guess you've got good luck, Mrs. Stone." "Good luck," she repeated. "Right." Still, she couldn't deny it. Being with him felt like living under an invisible halo. Every problem simply vanished, except the mystery of who her husband really was. The universe seemed to adore her lately. She once offhandedly wished her favorite bakery wouldn't run out of croissants. The next morning, the owner personally hand-delivered a whole box to her door. She forgot to pay her internet bill, yet her service never got cut off. Even at work, after fumbling through a terrible presentation, her boss suddenly praised her as if she'd just closed a $1 million deal. Liana started to notice a pattern. Every time something went wrong, Adrian was around. When she asked how things magically fixed themselves, he'd just chuckle. "Coincidence, love. Maybe the universe likes you." But Liana wasn't buying it anymore. The universe didn't take instructions from her husband. Saying the truth to women grew up was a lazy Sunday morning when everything changed. Liana was wrapped in a blanket, sipping through TV channels, and Adrian had gone out for work. It was a lazy Sunday morning when everything changed. Today we're joined by billionaire philanthropist Adrian Blackwood, famous for his obsession with his wife. Liana froze. On screen, sitting in a crisp black suit, was her husband. Her sweet, clingy, supposedly ordinary husband. Same smile, same deep voice, same gold watch on his wrist. "Adrian," the host asked, "what's the secret to your happiness?" He smiled softly at the camera. Block quote, simple. "I married the only woman who ever saw me as just a man, not a bank account." The audience laughed. Liana didn't. Because beside him, on the display behind the reporter, was a picture. A photo from their wedding. Her face. His arm around her waist. The wife the whole world was admiring was her. By the time Adrian came home that evening, Liana was waiting in the living room. No TV, no smile, no soft welcome back. Just quiet and a heart pounding with betrayal. "So," she began, voice trembling, "how long were you planning to keep me in the dark?" Adrian froze in the doorway, guilt flickering across his face. "Liana, you lied to me," she shouted. "You let me think you were some ordinary guy while you're out there on television as a billionaire." He stepped closer. "I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you yet." Her laugh was sharp. "That's the same thing!" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I wanted you to love me, the man, not the money. Do you know how rare that is?" Liana looked at him, torn between anger and heartbreak. All those coincidences, all those lucky moments. They were never luck. They were him. "You can't just fix my life behind my back and call it love, Adrian." "I can if it means keeping you safe." Silence fell between them, thick, fragile, and real. And in that silence, Liana finally saw him for what he was. Not a stranger anymore. Not a billionaire. Just a man who'd fallen hopelessly, recklessly in love with her. The next morning felt like waking up inside someone else's dream. Liana sat at the breakfast table, staring at the glossy magazine that had somehow found its way to her doorstep. Her own face smiled back at her from the cover. The woman who stole Adrian Blackwood's heart. She wanted to laugh, or cry, maybe both. Adrian entered, tie loosened, carrying 2 mugs of coffee like nothing was wrong. "Morning, love." "Very words about me." She held up the magazine. Morning headline. He winced. They move fast, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. His tone softened. "I'll fix this. I'll make sure they stay away." Liana exhaled, torn between anger and affection. "You can't control everything, Adrian." He smiled sadly. "Watch me." And somehow, the way he said it made her heart ache. Not with fear, but with something dangerously close to love. Being married to Adrian Blackwood came with complications. There were reporters camped outside the gate. Her co-workers whispered whenever she entered a room. Even her social media exploded overnight. Thousands of comments calling her lucky, beautiful, undeserving, fake. She shut it all off, but she couldn't shut off him. Adrian started coming home late, phone glued to his ear, his expression hard. But the moment he saw her, the billionaire melted away, replaced by the man who burned pancakes and kissed her shoulder good morning. "You don't have to pretend everything's normal," she told him one night. He smiled faintly. "I'm not pretending. You're my normal." And just like that, her anger started to lose its edge. Maybe love wasn't about having all the answers. Maybe it was about choosing to stay, even when the questions scared you. Her first public appearance as Mrs. Blackwood was a charity gala. The hall glittered with chandeliers, cameras, and judgment. Liana felt like an imposter in her silver gown. Everywhere she turned, someone whispered, "That's her? She's pretty, but not billionaire's wife pretty." Adrian noticed. Of course he did. He took her hand, guiding her through the crowd like he was the only woman in the room. "Eyes on me," he murmured. leaning close enough that only she could hear. No one else matters. For a moment, they danced, not for the cameras, not for the world, but for themselves. His palm warm on her waist, his breath against her ear. The lights blurred, and her heart forgot how to beat in rhythm. By the time the song ended, she realized something terrifying and beautiful at once. She wasn't pretending anymore. She was falling for him, completely. Title. P. Love never comes without a storm. P. The next morning, Liana woke to a headline that made her blood run cold. P. Strong. Adrian Blackwood's secret wife, tied to corporate scandal. They dug into her past, twisting her old job, her debts, even her aunt's address into scandalous lies. She felt the world closing in, piece by piece. Blackwood. They're destroying me, she whispered. And Blackwood. Adrian's jaw clenched, his voice like steel. P. Then I'll destroy them. First. That night, his office lights stayed on until dawn. Liana watched from the doorway, her heart breaking at how heavy the crown on his head truly was. He wasn't the cold billionaire the world painted him to be. He was a man fighting wars just to protect her name. And in that moment, she realized he didn't just love her. He needed her. The night was quiet. The kind of quiet that hummed with unspoken words. Liana found him on the balcony, city lights glowing beneath his silhouette. "You never told me why you really married me," she said softly. He turned, eyes shadowed but gentle. "Because you looked at me like I was human." She blinked. "That's all?" He smiled faintly. "That's everything." He took her hand, pressing it to his chest. "Before you, it was all business, numbers, empty smiles. Then you showed up. Not impressed, not intimidated. Just real." Liana felt tears sting her eyes. "You could have had anyone." "I didn't want anyone." Silence hung between them. Soft, trembling, intimate. Then he kissed her, slow and certain, like a promise. The world outside still whispered. The tabloids still hunted. But for that moment, it was just them. Two souls bound by a love that began with a lie and somehow turned into truth. For the first time in weeks, the world was silent. No headlines, no cameras, no gossip. Just sunlight spilling across the marble floor, and the soft sound of Adrian making coffee in the kitchen. Liana watched him from the doorway, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly messy, like he'd forgotten he was the most powerful man in the city. "You're staring," he said, without turning around. "You're worth staring at," she teased. He smiled, the kind of smile that made her forget every chaos outside those walls. When he handed her the mug, their fingers brushed, and something simple but certain settled between them. The quiet understanding that this wasn't a temporary fairy tale. It was real. Messy, complicated, imperfect, but real. And for Liana, that was more precious than any diamond he could buy. Chapter 12, Ghosts in His Eyes. That afternoon, Liana found Adrian sitting alone in his study, the one room he rarely let her. Stacks of old files, photos, letters, and on the desk, a single framed picture of a young woman she didn't recognize. "Who is she?" Liana asked softly. Adrian looked up, startled. His voice dropped. "Someone I couldn't save." Silence, heavy, fragile. He didn't explain further, but Liana saw it, the guilt buried deep in his eyes, the kind that didn't fade with time. That night, as they lay side by side, she whispered, "You don't have to carry the past alone." He turned toward her, his hand finding hers beneath the sheets. "And you don't have to fix me." But Liana already knew. She wasn't trying to fix him. She just wanted to know him. All of him. Chapter 13. The interview request. The calm didn't last. It never did. A week later, Adrian's assistant handed her an envelope. Inside was an invitation. Not for a gala this time, but for an exclusive television interview. The producers wanted her. They wanted the public to meet the woman behind the billionaire. Adrian was against it immediately. "You don't owe them your story, Liana." "Maybe I do," she countered. "They've written so many versions of me that aren't true. Maybe it's time I write my own." His jaw tightened. "The media doesn't care about truth. They'll twist whatever you say." "Then let them." "I'm not scared anymore." For the first time, Liana stood her ground, not as a woman in love, but as a woman claiming her place. And deep down, Adrian admired her even more for it. Chapter 14. The Spotlight. The studio lights were blinding. Liana sat on the velvet couch, microphone clipped to her dress, heart hammering. The host smiled warmly. "So tell us, Mrs. Blackwood, what's it really like being married to one of the richest men alive?" Liana smiled faintly. "Honestly, it's like being married to any other man, except mine makes terrible coffee when he's nervous." The audience laughed. But then the tone shifted. "There are rumors," the host pressed, "that your husband's fortune wasn't entirely clean, that his company was built on questionable deals." Liana's pulse spiked. She took a deep breath, keeping her voice calm. "People love to build stories when they don't understand the truth. My husband built his empire with his hands, not with deceit." He turned the volume down and stood there for a long moment, watching her breathe. Then his phone buzzed. A message from a number he thought he'd buried years ago. "You can't hide forever, Blackwood. She'll find out eventually." His heart sank. He opened his desk drawer, pulling out an old file marked with a single name, one he hadn't spoken in years. Block quote. "Not now," he whispered to himself. "Not her!" But fate never listened to warnings. And as the clock ticked past midnight, Adrian realized the life he built, the love he found, might be built on borrowed time. The message wouldn't leave Adrian's mind. Each word echoed like a ghost. "She'll find out eventually." For days, he pretended nothing was wrong. He laughed when Liana teased him, cooked breakfast, even sent her flowers to her office. But she wasn't blind. She saw the weight in his eyes. "You've been somewhere else lately," she whispered one night. "Talk to me." He brushed a thumb over her cheek. "It's nothing you need to worry about." That was a lie, and they both knew it. Liana didn't push. Not yet. But she'd learned one thing about loving Adrian Blackwood. Every secret had teeth, and sooner or later, it bit. It happened by accident. Liana had been looking for a charger in his study when she found the file. Inside, a photograph. Adrian, years younger, standing beside another man in front of a collapsing construction site. On the back, a single name scrawled in ink. Marcus Vane. And beneath it, a date that matched the accident everyone in the city still whispered about. The one that killed 3 workers and launched Adrian's company to fame. The air left her lungs. The puzzle pieces she'd ignored for months began to form a picture that terrified her. When Adrian walked in moments later, her hands were shaking. "Let's stop for a moment." His face paled. Silence spoke louder than any confession. "Please," she whispered, "tell me it's not what I think." But he couldn't. They argued until their voices cracked. "You said you built your company clean." "I did, but Marcus didn't. He made choices I didn't see until it was too late." Block quote. Block quote. "And you covered for him?" Adrian's jaw trembled. "He was my brother, Liana." The words hit her harder than any headline ever could. Block quote. "Your brother?" He nodded. "Half-brother. We shared the same father, the same ambition, until greed ruined him. When the accident happened, I took the blame so his wife wouldn't lose everything." Liana sank into a chair, speechless. All the lies, all the silence, it hadn't been about power. It had been about guilt. And for the first time, she didn't know whether to hate him or hold him. H2. For days they barely spoke. Adrian stayed locked in meetings. Liana stayed lost in thought. Reporters started sniffing around again. Someone had leaked the photo. "The world was ready for another scandal," she said, "because you made me feel seen." Secrets don't change that. They just make us fight harder. For the first time in days, his smile returned. Small, uncertain, but real. He pulled her close, forehead against hers. "You shouldn't have to fight my battles." "Then let's fight them together." The press conference was packed. Cameras, questions, flashing lights. Adrian walked out alone, refusing his lawyer's script. Liana watched from the wings, her heart pounding. "I made mistakes," he told the crowd. "Years ago, a man I loved like a brother cut corners that cost lives. I took responsibility because guilt felt easier than truth. But hiding hasn't helped anyone. Not them, not me, not my wife." The room fell silent. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he finished. "Just the chance to make things right." And as he stepped off the stage, the first person waiting for him wasn't a reporter. It was Liana. She didn't say a word, just reached for his hand. Because sometimes love isn't about choosing who's right. It's about choosing who's worth the storm. The world didn't end that day. The sky didn't fall. But something inside both of them broke and rebuilt differently. The headlines came and went, as they always did. The world moved on, but Liana and Adrian were left to pick up what fame and fear had scattered. Some nights, she woke to find him staring at the ceiling, lost in thoughts he didn't voice. She'd reach for his hand. He'd always squeeze back, wordless promises between fingers entwined. It wasn't the life she imagined when she'd married a stranger on a blind date, but it was real, and it was theirs. A month later, the foundation of Adrian's company began to shift, literally and figuratively. He resigned from the board. The empire he once guarded like a fortress was now being rebuilt with transparency. He didn't want to be a billionaire with secrets. He wanted to be a man his wife could be proud of. Meanwhile, Liana found her own rhythm. Again, working, creating, and refusing to let the tabloids define her. "You know," she teased one evening, You could have told me I was marrying a scandal magnate. He laughed, pulling her closer. Would you have said yes? No, she smirked. But I would have still shown up. And that was their love now. Equal parts chaos and comfort. It was an early autumn morning when a letter arrived. No return address, just a single line inside. He's still alive. Adrian froze. Marcus. The man everyone thought dead. The brother who'd vanished after the scandal. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. He wants to meet. Liana's heart twisted. She could see the war inside her husband. Relief, fear, anger. All tangled together. Then go, she said, softly. You need to see him. He hesitated. And if he's the reason all this started? She met his gaze. Then maybe he's also the reason it can finally end. The meeting happened in a quiet cabin by the sea. Marcus looked older, haunted. He carried the weight of his choices in every line on his face. You shouldn't have taken the blame, he said. Block quote. Period. You shouldn't have run, Adrian replied. Silence filled the space between them, thick with years of unspoken guilt. Block quote. I came back to fix what I broke, Marcus said finally. You gave me a life I didn't deserve. Maybe it's time I start earning it. Block quote. For the first time in years, Adrian saw not a ghost, but a brother. He didn't forgive him entirely, but he began to understand. And that, sometimes, was enough. When Adrian returned, Liana was waiting on the porch, wrapped in a shawl and the evening wind. He walked up the steps, eyes tired, but lighter. It wasn't about fixing or hiding. It was about being. You know, she murmured against his chest. We've survived lies, fame, and family secrets. What's next? Peace, hopefully. He tilted her chin up, eyes full of warmth. Then maybe a honeymoon we never took? Liana laughed, eyes glinting with the promise of something new. Now that sounds like trouble I can handle. The night wind carried their laughter across the quiet hills. Two hearts that had met by accident, fought by fate, and stayed by choice. Because love, real love, wasn't the absence of chaos. It was choosing each other, again and again, through it. The ocean was endless. A mirror of blue and gold stretching into tomorrow. Liana stood barefoot on the balcony of their villa, silk robe brushing against her thighs, the morning light kissing her skin. Below, the waves sighed against the rocks, slow, patient, eternal. It had been 3 months since everything changed. 3 months since the world stopped talking about them and started talking about something else. And for the first time since her blind date wedding, Liana finally felt free. Behind her, she heard the soft rustle of sheets. You're up early, Adrian's voice came, low and drowsy. She smiled without turning. I couldn't sleep. The sea was too loud. Or maybe you missed me beside you, he teased, stepping out from the shadows. He was barefoot too, hair messy, shirt halfway unbuttoned, sunlight catching the faint scar near his collarbone. Liana turned, eyes softening. You always think everything revolves around you. Doesn't it? She laughed, a sound that still surprised her sometimes, light and unguarded. He walked up behind her, slipping his arms around her waist, the warmth of him pressed against her back. The scent of salt and coffee lingered between them. You look like a dream, he murmured, lips brushing her shoulder. How are you real? In my head, I ask myself the same thing about you, she whispered. They had escaped to Greece, to a quiet island where no one cared who they were. No cameras, no headlines, just wind, sea, and the slow rhythm of two hearts learning peace again. In the beginning, they had been nervous, both still carrying the ghosts of everything that had happened. But each sunrise made them lighter. They wandered through narrow streets, bought olives from old women who spoke in songs, and got lost among white-walled houses covered in pink bougainvillea. Everywhere they went, people mistook them for ordinary lovers, and for once, they didn't correct them. That evening, they returned from a long walk through town, laughing about how Adrian got scolded by a fisherman for trying to help with the nets. "You're terrible at pretending to be normal," Liana teased, unlocking their villa door. "Excuse me, I was helping," he said, mock offended. "That man said I was tying knots wrong. Who even knew there were rules?" "Sailors, literally everyone who sails," she grinned. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" "Every second." She turned to find him watching her. Not playfully, not arrogantly, just with quiet awe. The kind of gaze that said, "I can't believe you're still here." He stepped closer, closing the distance. "You're glowing," he said softly. "That's just the sunset." "No," he whispered, "that's you." The laughter melted between them. The air thickened. His hand lifted to her jaw, his thumb tracing the curve of her lip. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The world shrank to the sound of the sea outside and the faint rhythm of their breaths. They kissed like it was the first time all over again. Not desperate, not frantic, just deep. Certain. The kind of kiss that built and lingered, full of everything they had survived. Liana's hands slid up the back of his neck. His fingers tangled in her hair. The weight of his touch said everything words couldn't. He lifted her easily, her laughter swallowed by another kiss, as he carried her toward the bed. The curtains fluttered like sails behind them, the last light of day spilling gold across the room. Outside, the world kept spinning. Inside, time forgot them completely. Later, much later, they lay tangled in silence, the air still warm and salt-sweet. Liana rested her head on his chest, tracing lazy circles on his skin. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The spotlight?" Adrian shook his head. "No. I spent years chasing the world's attention, and the only thing that ever mattered was right here." She smiled against him. "Smooth talker. And you know what's strange? The moonlight painted them silver. Outside, waves whispered against the rocks. Steady, like a heartbeat. You know what's strange? We met because someone thought two strangers would make a perfect match. And they were right," he said quietly. He brushed her hair aside, his touch tender. "I wouldn't change a single thing, not even the chaos, especially the chaos." In the following days, their honeymoon became something between healing and rediscovery. They explored islands no one talked about on travel blogs. He painted, for the first time in years. She wrote poetry on napkins and seashells. They talked about the future, not in grand plans or promises, but in laughter and lazy mornings. Sometimes she'd catch him watching her, the same way he had on that first night in their small apartment, when he'd made her tea and smiled like she was already home. And sometimes she'd surprise him, showing up in his office with lunch, or dragging him out for a swim at midnight, their laughter echoing through the dark like a secret only the ocean knew. They were learning to live again. To love without fear. A few weeks into their honeymoon, Adrian received a message from his assistant. Someone had published a new article. Not a scandal this time, but a feature. It read, "From billionaire to husband, Adrian Blackwood's quiet redemption." He stepped away from the empire he built, but found something far greater, the kind of peace you can't buy. The world saw him not as a headline, but as human. And Liana, reading over his shoulder, smiled. "They finally got it right," she said. He kissed her temple. "They finally got us right." That night, they hosted a small dinner for the locals who had taken them in. The fisherman, the baker, the old woman who sold them olives. There was laughter, music, clinking of glasses, and somewhere between dessert and dancing, Adrian took Liana's hand and led her outside. The stars stretched endless above them. The ocean shimmered below. "You know," he said, "I used to think love was something you found. And now?" He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Now I know. It's something you build. Every day, every choice, every scar." She leaned into him. "Then we've built something extraordinary," he nodded. "And it's only the beginning." Years later, people would still whisper their story. The billionaire who disappeared. The woman who changed him. The love that survived the spotlight. But for Liana and Adrian, it was never about the story. It was about the quiet moments, sunrise coffee, shared glances, the feeling of his hand finding hers even when she didn't ask. They had been strangers once, then partners, then survivors. Now they were simply home. In the end, it wasn't the secret that defined them, but the love that stayed when the truth was finally known. He stopped hiding, and she stopped running. And somewhere between the fame and the quiet mornings, they found home in each other. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who still believes in love that finds you, even when you're not looking.